Leslie Flint was born in London in 1911. For over 20 years, researchers recorded the voices that came through him. What they captured has never been satisfactorily explained. In this video, you will hear 3 of those transcripts: a World War I soldier, a vanished aviator, and a man who died suddenly and came back saying he wouldn't return to Earth for anything. Each of them describes where they went. Amy Johnson was born in Yorkshire, England in 1903 and was a pioneering English pilot who was the first woman to fly solo from London to Australia. She flew in the Second World War as a part of the Air Transport Auxiliary and disappeared in 1941 during a ferry flight. The cause of her death has been subject of discussion over many years. 29 years after her death, she was interviewed in January 1970 by Betty Green, and the medium was Leslie Flint. The following is an edited account of that conversation. Amy Johnson: I'm not terribly in touch with your world now. Occasionally, just now and again, I hear from various people things that are happening, and certainly the world doesn't seem to improve in some respects, does it? If only people did understand more about this business of dying and life after death, and the kind of world, to some extent, that they will find. I mean, I just think it's dreadful. I think it's awful to think that people don't understand this. I mean, when I first came over here, it was a great shock. Time is most peculiar with us. We're not subject to it anymore. Time, space, distance, so many things that apply on Earth don't seem to have the same meaning here. There is a form of time, I suppose, but it's not measured by the sun and the moon, stars and the calendar. I've got all sorts of interests. I've lost interest in flying, which I suppose to some people must sound very strange, but of course one doesn't need to. Anyway, one doesn't need mechanical things here. It's not necessary anymore. Then Betty Green asked, what do you think now is the most important thing? Amy Johnson: I suppose really sort of trying and to learn more and to express myself better in various ways. I think the whole thing is knowing more about evolution and evolving onto a different strata and sort of opening one's experience to wider horizons. I mean, I certainly don't think I've got anything whatever to do with material things. I mean, as I've already said, I'm not interested really to that extent anymore in material things. One feels sad and sorry about the way the world is, and one would like to help if one can. But it seems to me that human beings will go on and on making the same sort of mistakes, and I only hope that at some time they begin to learn something from them and change accordingly. I think the only thing is that if people understood this truth, realised the realities of it, I think it could help tremendously. But I think the vast majority of people are completely blind to it. They're not interested. They don't want to know. I feel that in spite of religions, and certainly it seems to me that, often people who should know don't know. It seems often the blind leading the blind. I don't think people are interested. I think they're more and more materialistically minded, and everybody knows they've got to die, and nobody seems to want to know anything about it, or very few. And everybody puts it off, doesn't want to think about it, talk about it, and know about it. I mean, it seems to me it's the most important factors, the most important things in life that people push aside. I suppose I did. Most of us do. Indeed, when on Earth, I think that when I was flying, that, I don't know, I suppose it was being entirely on my own up there, as you might say. I had plenty of opportunity and time to think, and I did a tremendous amount of thinking. I think that in a kind of odd way, I was much nearer to what you would call spiritualism or realization of things than the average person. I didn't know anything practically, that is, from a practical point of view, I mean. But now, of course, by looking back, I realize that mentally I was, in a sense, very much in tune. I was highly sensitized by the very fact of, I suppose, my job. It may sound odd, but it's true. I think that one got away from people, got away from material things, and one was entirely, as it were, on one's own. And I think that mentally, in an odd, strange kind of way, you're in touch. Put it like that. I wouldn't have said that at the time, I wouldn't have thought it perhaps, but it's extraordinary, the things that seem to flow through one's mind, and somehow death didn't seem to matter. One didn't feel it either. A most extraordinary sensation. I think a lot of flyers are like that. I think that they lose weight in a sense, material weight, and problems seem to drift away from them. When you're up there and you see, it must be even more so with these astronauts. I think that that's what makes it possible for them to do the things they do. I think that one realizes the immensity of life and that it's not just purely physical or material. I think that in an odd kind of way you realize that you're much more than you seem, and the body is merely, just something that enables you to experience. But it's only obviously something that in itself is a means to an end, and that it isn't the be-all and end-all. I think that one gets the feeling when you are, as it were, away from Earth. I know I look back on my life now and I see things so differently. I think that I had no fear really. In a sense, I think I felt happier away from Earth than on it. I mean, of course, I had my moments when I enjoyed things, but I don't know, I was always happiest when I was away from Earth in a plane. I think I was more myself. And that was because, in a kind of odd way, I was out of myself. I realise now that this was a psychic experience. I think I was out of the Earth sort of environment and condition and away from the contamination of material things, and in some odd way I was sort of being mentally and spiritually sort of tuned in. I know this sounds weird, but it's true. Betty Green then asked, looking back now on your flying career, do you think that there were times when you were possibly helped by somebody, a flyer say from the other side, who had been a flyer on Earth? Amy Johnson: yes, to a point. But there again, I think that knowing from judging my own experience of things, trying to help people on Earth is a very difficult thing. You may be able to influence them to a certain extent mentally, and there again it depends on the individual. And the state and condition of the world being what it is, it's very difficult for us to do very much. We would like to, but it's not until people themselves make the effort, sort of mentally, sort of want to be helped. Sort of really to have, to some extent, make it possible. All this business of being helped, I mean, often people, when they're in a difficulty and in trouble, they sort of mentally sort of ask for help, or perhaps they even pray for help, and sometimes they're fortunate, and sometimes they are helped. But quite often, it's useless because until you open the door, you can't expect anyone to enter in. But so many people, really without even realising it, not only shut the door, but put the bolt and bar on. You see, the whole point is that if a person wants to find out and to know, then to some extent, they've got to, open the door. They've got to sort of have some faith. They've got to answer the door when someone knocks, and not sort of have it ajar and sort of peep around the corner. They've got to have some faith and open the door wide so the person can come in. It's no good sort of just standing there and sort of being afraid and apprehensive as to whether you pull the bar or the bolt, and open the door a bit. I realise to some extent it's understandable that people are doubtful and fearful and what have you, but unless they make some effort, then there's not much that we can do to help them. It depends on the individual to a great extent. There must be reciprocation, there must be effort, there must be, for instance, in any field of activity, quite apart from this being able to communicate or wanting to communicate and so on, and knowing something of this truth. The whole point is that in every walk of life, unless you take risks, unless you're prepared to make the effort to find out and to experiment and to really, in a sense, sort of go all out, you don't just achieve anything. The whole trouble is that the vast majority of people are afraid. They're full of fear. That's the trouble with the world. Once you realise that the whole of the universe is part and parcel of the other, every individual is part of someone else, and that you're all part and parcel of the same spirit, the same manifestation of flesh even. It may take different shapes or forms. You have the animal kingdom, but they're still linked up with the human race. And if you treat animals badly, then in some odd way, don't ask me how, but it will eventually reflect upon them, the individuals. It will reflect upon the human race. You cannot escape from natural law, and you're bound to have all these things happen that distress one so, because man has made it possible. Anyway, I must go, but I'll come again sometime. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit like. It really helps to keep the channel growing. And if you're new here, subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest videos. We've got lots of strange and fascinating stories coming up, and we'd love to have you along for the journey. Leslie Flint was born in London in 1911 and has been described by spiritualists as the most renowned psychic of the 20th century. Two researchers, Betty Green and George Woods, worked alongside Flint, where they recorded Leslie Flint's seance communications for over 20 years. The following conversation took place between the deceased man by the name of Mr. Olsen, who was a personal friend of both Betty Green, George Woods and Leslie Flint. Olsen was also interested in spiritualism and healing, and his passing was very sudden. However, in November 1967, he then returned to them in spirit, where he was able to communicate with them using Leslie Flint as the medium, where he describes the afterlife. The researchers started the interview with, "Hello, who's that?" And the spirit of Mr. Olsen replied with, "Good Lord, Olsen here? Oh, Mr. Olsen, hello." Olsen then said, "How are you both?" "Oh, very well, fine, thank you." They asked Olsen, "How are you getting on?" "Very well, no regrets. I'm very happy. I wouldn't come back if you offered me all the gold and china. I'm perfectly well and perfectly happy. And I can't tell you how marvellous it is to be dead." Olsen continued, "Well, you know, I was very interested in all this, and I used to go to meetings with you. But that was a few years ago. My goodness me, people should think themselves lucky the day they kicked the bucket." They then asked Olsen, "What sort of condition did you find yourself in? What sort of place?" Olsen replied, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, the place in which I found myself was, the nearest one can say, is like some country place. It could be anywhere in a sense. I mean, there were trees and the birds, and just as if one was walking up in a country village. I realised that very soon afterwards, thousands and thousands of people, many, live in what you'd call apartment houses, vast buildings housing thousands of people. All sound rather like a large council estate, but nothing like that really. I think this place I first came to was a kind of reception station. It's the only way I can put it, because it is pretty obvious that quite a lot of people, when they first come, they do need help and attention. They need to be sort of helped through. It is a difficult period. They don't take to it in the beginning. The realization that they're separated from people they're close to and fond of on earth, when they realize that although they can return, they very seldom do. They have the opportunity to have a chat or to comfort people they know and love on earth. They soon begin to realize that they're not acknowledged and not welcome. Of course, there's a great distress to people at first. That's why they do have these reception stations where there are advanced souls in attendance who know how to deal with these difficult cases, and in consequence, they're soon nurtured in a new way of thinking. I think the most difficult cases are those who have strong convictions, religious convictions, and a narrow outlook. Oh, we have community centres, and their children, of course, are one of the greatest joys. I've seen so many children who live with their people over here. Of course, many of them, their parents are still on earth, but they're taken in charge by people related to them, like a grandmother and so on. But if there is no close tolerant relationship, there are always souls here who'll take charge. And we have schools for them, and they learn all sorts of things, many of them more important than they learned at school on earth. Do you know that there are vast cities here? But also, you do get communities of people who, because of their nationality when on earth, they have the habit of clinging together or being together. This is usually, of course, a temporary thing with most of them. We have great halls of learning and of music. One can study any particular thing that appeals to one, mostly of an artistic endeavour, because it seems to me, I can realise that much more now, that art and the things of the mind and of the spirit are the things that are the most lasting, obviously. You see, this is a real world, but it's not a material world. Therefore, we don't have the material aspects like you do on Earth. You don't get factories, for instance. You don't get railways and stations. And thank God, you don't get all the noise, the filth and the dirt. Here, it is a world of absolute beauty. And there's the joy of progress in everything. The feeling of elation that comes with the realization that all the time you're stepping forward. There's always something new, something more interesting, some new experience, some new place to go, new people to visit, fresh arrivals come over from Earth, people we have known and loved, helping them to settle, getting them interested in all sorts of things over here. It's not a wishy-washy affair over here. It's not some sort of vague thing. It's a real existence, and we are in our own way as physical as you are. Yet, it's not a physical body as you have it. To all outward appearance, it may look the same, but it isn't. The construction is different. I mean, we are living on a vibration that is so far removed from Earth, and everything is rarefied in consequence, and everything that we do has a meaning and a purpose. Your world, to me, seems, well, it is as if there's a dark, dreary, foggy atmosphere. Of course, the thought forces emanating from your world, en masse, are so terrible. There's all this upset, hatred, bitterness, and malice. I wouldn't want to come back to it. This is a world of mental reality, which, by the very power that generates it, creates what you might call a physical condition or picturization of things. The more one sort of develops mentally and spiritually here, the more conscious and aware you become of other places, vistas, and people. It's just a matter of tapping the source and becoming, as it were, tuned into it. The researchers then asked Mr. Olsen, "How do you spend your time now?" And he responds with, "Time? Time? Well, we're not conscious of time. Time does not mean anything to us. But coming back to you, we're conscious of time to some extent. People say, oh well, I'm sure so-and-so will come back and speak because it's his birthday. Well, we couldn't care less in a sense about birthdays. In fact, we probably wouldn't even remember it was our birthday if it were not for the fact that we pick up on the idea or the thought from the consciousness of the individual near and dear to us on Earth." The discussion with Mr. Olsen lasted for half an hour, and then the signal weakened, well, they had to say goodbye to him. Raymond Lodge was the youngest son of Sir Oliver and Lady Lodge and was training to be an engineer when World War I began. Raymond then volunteered for service in September 1914, and because of his engineer training was given a commission in the 3rd South Lancashire and became Second Lieutenant Raymond Lodge. After his training, he was sent to the front in the spring of 1915 and attached to the 2nd South Lancashire Regiment of the Regular Army, and was not long before he saw action in the trenches near Ypres. In the trenches, he was lucky to survive many encounters from shell fire and shrapnel, but his luck ran out on the 14th of September 1915 when he was struck by a fragment of shell in the attack on Hooge Hill and died in a few hours. The following notification came via a telegram from the War Office on the 17th of September 1915 with the following words: "Deeply regret to inform you that 2nd Lieutenant R. Lodge, 2nd South Lancashire, was wounded on the 14th of September and has since died. Lord Kitchener expresses his sympathy." The following telegram was sent from the King and Queen on the 21st of September 1915. "The King and Queen deeply regret the loss you and the Army have sustained by the death of your son in the service of his country. Their Majesties truly sympathise with you in your sorrow." However, that would not be the last time his parents would have communications with their son, when on the 25th of September 2015, his mother was sitting with a medium called Mrs. Leonard. The medium had received the following message purporting to come from a deceased son, Raymond. "Tell father I have met some friends of his." His mother asked him for a name, and he replied, "Myers." Myers was a close friend of his father's, who had died many years ago in Rome when Raymond was just 12 years old. 2 days later, on the 27th of September, she had another sitting with Mrs. Leonard, who informed her that her guide was a young girl with the name of Fida. Short time later, the medium went into a trance, which he described a young man with a message that said, "He finds it difficult but he's got so many kind friends helping him. He didn't think when he first woke up that he was going to be happy, but now he is, and he says he's going to be happier. He knows that as soon as he is a little more ready, he's got a great deal of work to do. I almost wonder, he says, shall I be fit and able to do it? They tell me I shall. I have instructors and teachers with me. People think I say I'm happy in order to make them happier, but I don't. I've met many new friends. I don't know them all. I've met many who tell me that they will explain why they are helping me. I feel I've got two fathers now. I don't feel I've lost one and got another. I've got both. There is a weight off my mind, and I feel brighter and lighter and happier altogether. There was confusion at first. I could not get my bearings. I didn't seem to know where I was. But it was not very long, he says, and I think I was very fortunate. It was not very long before it was explained to me where I was. His father, Oliver Lodge, was an experienced researcher into paranormal phenomena and a former president of the British Society for Psychical Research, and believed that his son was communicating with him from the spirit world. Before they approached other mediums, Sir Oliver was careful who he communicated with and remained anonymous in his inquiries with various mediums to prevent possible charlatans gaining information on him and his family. Sir Oliver and his wife then proceeded to have regular sittings with mediums to enable them to further communicate with their deceased son. Their son claimed that the spirit world was like a summerland and was a place where the dead were allowed time to recover from the shock of their death. They were also reunited with relatives who had previously died. Raymond also claimed to have been reunited with his brother and sister, and the first person to greet him when he first passed over was his grandfather. He said that his surroundings were much like that on Earth, and he lived in houses made of brick, and there were trees, flowers and rivers, and the ground was solid. There were also libraries. People were initially allowed to wear earthly clothes, but eventually most people wore robes. People were even allowed to smoke cigars and drink whiskey if they still had the cravings. To test his son further, he asked him very personal and private questions, where Raymond had amazing knowledge and detail of his life on Earth, that his brothers had given him the nickname Pat, and he'd called his hockey teammates Norman, which were correct on both accounts. He was accurately able to describe his drawing room of his home. He also knew the name of their family pet peacock, and was able to describe a tent and sand yacht that he and his brothers had built during their seaside holidays. However, there was one piece of convincing evidence that could not be explained away, where on September the 27th, 1915, a medium had told his mother that Raymond had talked about a photograph that had been taken about 2 months before he was killed. A short time later, a mother of one of the other soldiers in the photograph had written to her asking whether she would like a copy of a photograph that had been taken that had included her son shortly before he died. Before the photograph had arrived, his father attended a seance where he wanted to know more about the photograph that his son was in. Through the medium, his son said that the photograph had been taken against a black background with lines at the back of them, and also that while they were posing, someone was leaning on him but was unsure whether that came out in the photo. When the photograph finally arrived, everything was as son had described, from the dark background, and the lines at the back were roof timbers that formed vertical lines. However, the most convincing aspect of the photograph was that an officer could be seen leaning on him, just as Raymond had described. The strangest thing was that 3 photos had been taken, and only one of the photos showed someone leaning on him. Yet Raymond had known this and was uncertain whether that had been the actual photograph that had been chosen. This is a familiar description that many people have given when describing the afterlife. Is it proof that when we leave this earthly existence, we do not suddenly cease to exist?